having a gender approach, it's not about having an approach for women. It's about having an approach for each gender.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Design to Connect, and hello to my co-host Arisu.
Hi.
Hi.
It's hot.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it is.
I needed to
It
say
is
that
super hot.
because last time it was raining,
True.
and this time it's suddenly very hot. So
Yeah, we'll see you in the next episode what is going to happen with our bodies and with the temperature outside.
Yes, I felt I needed to say
No,
that.
of course. So to give you just an overview of this episode, if you've been following this series, what we are talking about is gender and gender inequality, and basically how it has a really huge impact on the built environment. And of course, as we've seen, it has an impact on how people access public space and urban space, depending, of course, of their gender as well. So gender inequality, as we always talk about, is just it's not just a surface issue, but is a systemic problem, of course. And we know that it affects, our society. So today we are really glad to have someone that is really trying to address this as a systematic problem and going beyond what is the physical appearance of spaces, but really going into what are the processes behind of gender inequality and how do we deal not only with the symptoms, but really going to the root of this cause of what is happening in our society. So this was a bit of an overview. What we are also going to talk is about policy making and data. And I'm really excited because we are it's not really our field, but as always, we are trying to understand how do you do this at the intersection of these different fields.
And who we have today is someone that is working on the intersection of all those different things and many other things. She is the president and co-founder of Period Think Tank, Giulia Sudano. The Period Think Tank it's a really cool name. I should just say that, but we will go into the meanings of that name and what the organization do later. But yeah, Giulia, thank you for being here with us today from Rome, the streets of Rome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
We are so happy. So we are gonna start our talk with asking about how you are. How do you really feel? How do you feel really in this moment or in this season of your life? Let's start with that.
Wow, that's a very big question.
I told you I'm gonna be the philosophical one here.
Wow, I'm amazed. No, they're very challenging times for everybody in the world. I mean, there are many crises, multiple crises going on at the same time. It's a very unfair world, going more unfair every month that goes by. So worrying times. Theoretically, there are also opportunity times, because where there are crises, there are also opportunities. So the hope, we try to be optimistic, is that we, get advantage of opportunities. Would be very difficult, but try to, find new ideas, new practices. I'm a feminist activist. Using intersectional feminism, I immediately underline this point, and we will talk about it a little bit later. I'm happy in the sense that I'm happy about what our organization Period Think Tank is doing. I also work with a feminist NGO for my work side, because Period Think Tank is our activism. That's why I'm in Rome, because the organization is in Rome. So I'm happy to also on the work side be able to deal with feminist activism and women's rights. And also LGBT rights. So, I mean, it's good, but it's very challenging. I'm worried, like everyone. It's a very special year because we have almost 50 countries going to elections, big ones with big scary things. So we have wars, we have climate disasters. I mean, we have everything. So, I mean,
everything.
Let's hope that at least, the bigger is the challenge, the bigger is our reaction to structural problems. I think one of the biggest challenges is to mobilize more people, because I feel that on the activist side, there are still too few people really mobilitate. So we need to spread consciousness and willingness to activate in the be active in the first person to change its world. This is just to give an headline. I think it's the main priority, because few people cannot change the world. We need to have a global movements getting together, but many people that are able to, the people that have the privilege to do so, because of course many people cannot do it because they don't have the means and the opportunity to do it, but there are still many that can and just don't do anything. So we need to get to them and try to activate them to help us out in build a better world, a just world that's fair for everybody, because people understand that really if everybody's not okay, does not have the same opportunities everybody else, in the end will live well if there is even a person suffering injustice. So that's, I think, the main point we should try to make people understand.
No, definitely the interconnectedness of the world, which
before jumping into period think tank, something we were wondering about in how and why it all started, like why you are interested in these topics and how you started and when.
So me and also other, let's say, it starts for me.
It's for you.
Practice, I start for myself. And so I'm a feminist activist since 10 years, more than 10 years, more or less. So for me, was Period Think Tank. It's a new chapter in my feminist activism. It's a new way, because it deals with data feminism. It's a very new thing for at least Italy, for sure, even Europe, because this movement, we will talk a little bit more about it, starts more in American continent, both North and South, not just North America. So I have, let's say, a longer experience. So when you get the consciousness that we not live in a neutral world, the world is not neutral, it's not like that. So when your eyes change completely, you understand that you have been brought up in a very patriarchal and sexist system, you understand it. There is no neutrality, there is no universal, there is no many things. And you finally realize it, you're conscious about it, you start live a different life. And so that's what happened for me when I was 26, more or less. Start to, I was in Bologna and I got in touch with different feminist groups, and then that's where it all started. And I have been part of feminist groups, feminist LGBT movements, so very different formats, but with similar, let's say, goals. So I also experienced different way and practices to do political activism. It was very interesting. I learned a lot. It was a great life-changing experience. Also frustrating at times, because it's also something to be more critical about. It's the way we do politics, how we try in Italy, especially. We should be, I think, more critical about what means and practices we use to achieve our goals. And that's what also we are trying to be, to act with our association. And then in 2000, during the COVID pandemic, I want to make a long story short, because I mean, it's still a podcast. It's not a biography about
That's good. We enjoy it.
I try to be quick, not too long at least. And so we get to 2020, the pandemic, and we were doing some surveys about how women were experiencing COVID and what could have been the different experiences, gender experiences. And then there I understood with other friends that we were doing the surveys. So get in touch with friends, women that were working on statistics, data analysis. And we understood that there was a specific time window of opportunity and maybe need to talk more about data feminism. It was important to use data as a leverage, as an instrument to do activism, to do advocacy, to do lobbying. So we understood that maybe it could have been a good moment to, using a slogan, we usually say we want to bring feminism in the data world and data in the feminist world. That's what we're trying to do, also to be a bridge between it, because otherwise people dealing with data and advocacy about data, that are very technical, maybe people, and even if they're very important topics, open data, the issue of open data, it's not something that mobilizes people. So we said, if we apply this instrument, the concept, to something that's really close to people's needs, maybe we enlarge the movement to ask institutions to use open data, and also to acknowledge and do activism about the topic. So for instance, we apply open data to open data about abortion. So you apply the instrument to topics that are close to activism. Environmentally, activists can do it for the environment. Housing issues, health issues, you can do it about everything. So we should join all the different, topics, because otherwise advocating for open data for itself, even if it's right, unfortunately, it's not appealing to people. In order to be more and more, because unless you really build up a big pressure on institution, they just don't move, they don't do anything, because having open data and instruments it's compulsory by law, but law, it's not enough. Unless they feel the pressure to apply some laws, they don't do it otherwise. So we need to be strong in that. So what we do, we want to, as Spirit Think Tank, fight for gender equity, and we underline equity, not equality, because we think that in a very unjust system, you need to look for equity, because you cannot treat the same way all the people, because there are differences and inequalities. So you should look for equity and just approach to close the gaps. And so gender equity, in order to get to this gender equity, we are using a feminist approach to data. That's our mission. So it means understanding what are the oppressions regarding data representation, because if you don't represent some issues and some kind of people in the topics, they're not visible. They're invisible people. So there are plenty of invisible people that so nobody talks about their issues, the problems, and so that's why it means to be, feminist about this. So to say, make visible what's invisible to politics, to society, in order to tackle and face gender inequalities in an intersectional approach, because women are not the same. So you need to understand, how a black woman living in Italy is different than a white woman living in Italy, rich or poor, able or disabled, trans or cisgender. I mean, there are all issues that need to be tackled all together, because otherwise we need in this paradox that companies know everything about us with our smartphones, and they extract profits for themselves, and institutions don't use information about our own selves to apply and understand the right politics and policies for each one of us. That's the issue, the big issue. So, of course, respecting everybody's privacy. So there are plenty of ways to respect the privacy of the people, but at the same time, understanding each one's needs to understand which policies are more effective. So that's what we are fighting for, and we decided to achieve it with a campaign, and we start immediately with this campaign called Data to Count. So we're asking to institutions to formal engagement, that's open, disaggregated, gender disaggregated data. That's the first one, because if you don't know the phenomenon you're dealing with, you cannot understand how to act. So you need to analyze the context for every issue, every policy or action you need to understand, and then apply the gender impact assessment. So we're asking an engagement when you program your policies to ask yourself, what's going to be the impact of what I'm doing? It's going to be the same for men, women, or other genders, other kind of people. Who I'm impacting, why, what are my objectives? But from the beginning, that's a completely cultural shift that we're asking to our institution, because they just decide what to do, but they don't think the impact on people. And so that's what we are trying to achieve. So we start with local institutions, and we at the same time work on different levels, but we work on levels at different levels at the same time. So a county, a city, regional, the national government, according to the issues. So all are the same, because we understood that everybody is influencing the other level. So you need to push every side in order to move, getting something, move the machine, move the, especially the bureaucratic machine. It's very complex in order to influence each other. So we are starting. Then you will ask me questions, but give you just a basic idea. So we are working on. Okay, with this campaign, so we ask about public policy. So we ask different. We have different local cities supporting this campaign. Bologna was the first, but then we had Milano, we had Palermo, even smaller cities. So it's something that everybody can do because it takes political will to do it. So we are very interested and focused on public policies. So our advocacy is institution need to invest in data, gender data, pay people able to analyze data in a certain way, be conscious of the gender approach to it, and invest. So we don't want to substitute ourselves to the institution. That's not right. I mean, we don't want to do it. We want them to, in order to, choose the right public policy, to invest and using these instruments that should be that theoretically are requested by a European institution, the gender equality plan, the United Nations 2030 development agenda, but we don't apply it. So that's what we are fighting for. We are fighting that our institution applies these instruments because they will really change completely the way public policies are done. But we also deal with, for instance, artificial intelligence. So all the gender discrimination that can come from artificial intelligence. So discrimination with algorithms, with data sets. So we are also working with, for instance, now we are partnering in a European project called Equitas, led by the University of Bologna, and we are trying to develop algorithms and guidelines for enterprises, institutions that want to use artificial intelligence to do it in a fair way, so they don't amplify discrimination and prejudice and biases. So we start to apply this to, it can be applied to any topic. And so we are working national project like monitoring the impact of the national and resilience plan for Italy after the with the Next Generation EU funds. We work on artificial intelligence. We work with cities on gender, budgeting, gender policies. We're working in Bologna for a gender atlas right now. So we're doing many different. We were working on advocacy. We're working on requesting free access to abortion pills in our in Italy and in certain regions. So we really apply to many kind of topics. So it's very challenging, but it's good because I mean we're trying to build this consciousness of data, and also something I really want to focus for feminist activism that's missing in Italy. It's the advocacy mentality. So we don't have the advocacy mentality like okay, we have an agenda, we go to the institution and we negotiate to get our request accepted, which doesn't mean to de-radicalize our requests. Something that's very culturally difficult for many movements in Italy and feminist groups is to, we don't go there and, just mediate our request. We keep our radicality, the requests we want to make, but we need to find the negotiations in the steps to get there and engage the institution, because if we just go to the streets, which is very important, we need to do protests, we need to do them, absolutely. It can only be our only way. We need to have other practices to engage and ask for change, because the issue for us is how you get change, how you get to the change you want to achieve. And so you need to have different instruments. You cannot have just one way, one strategy, one way of doing things. So we're trying also to share this idea of getting advocacy practices, advocacy campaigns, and use them to achieve our goals next to protests, manifestation, and what we are, already doing.
Yeah, I guess because we said it, maybe just shortly tell us why your name, like where does it come from?
I say a joke in the beginning because you said it's a very cool name. I really appreciate it. Thank
is.
you for that. But it's terrible
is.
for the Italian audiences. You cannot have
Alright.
how they mixed up. They don't get anything about
I
this
know.
name.
It's
So
good
some
in
of us,
English.
it's good in English. So it's not very cool. But actually, over time, some of our members saying we really fucked up the name because in Italy nobody understands it.
Okay, we
So
did.
the story is very cool, and I'm gonna tell you. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, we are realizing that people are doing so much effort because we're not a very well English-speaking nation country. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, there are many issues. But okay, the story is okay. Period is because the period, so the female period means menstruation. So because we want to relate to the feminist issues like the body is center, any kind of body, not just women body, but still connected issues connected to the body.
Yeah.
And at the same time, period in English, it's an expression that says when you want to stop with something, say period, like
Yeah.
that's it, right?
Yeah.
And so we like it in the sense
It's
of,
cool.
stop with discriminations. Okay,
Yeah.
period, with this unfair
Basta.
word, injustice, discrimination, period. That's it.
Okay.
And then think tank, it's we wanna from the think tank model, we are getting this advocacy lobbying idea, but we want to make it feminist in the sense that we don't work for academia. We don't have an academic approach. We have people that work also in academia, have very specific skills, but the issues that how we get consciousness about data, about policies in a more pop way, direct to the main public. We don't want to talk to specialists or academics, but through academics that want to do activism with this feminist approach, we want to make the general public have more information and consciousness about data, about the importance of use them and in fights, in policies. So that's why we thought to take the think tank model. Also at the time, it was 2020, it was coming up the G20 at the time in Italy, and there was a group for think tanks. So we thought also that could have been useful for certain international gatherings open to think tanks or something. So these are all the stories behind it. So there were plenty of reasons, but
intersectionality is also there.
Yes, but unfortunately, we found out that they're struggling to get our name, so it's not easy.
Okay, I'm happy that we got you before you changed the name. We can write period think tank.
Yeah, some members
like
think we should change the name, but it's very complicated to change because now people try to hear it. So we cannot just, you know what I mean? It's already 3 years and a half that we are, fighting and doing things. People start to understand. So
yes,
I know it's a double mess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, the name itself has awareness raising, so that's
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it links to your first question that we.
Talking about biased data, we were thinking and also reading your things and going through your stuff. Women are seen as minorities. They are also addressed as minorities. So we wanted to kind of start going to the depth of the issues by understanding what minority actually means and what is the reality of the number of women or, there, because the language, of course, is really important. The language around all of these topics is important. And when we see women are minority, even if it's not true, already it puts the other gender on a pedestal. So we already think if women are minority, they are less, so their needs are less important, and the men become more closer to the main average part of the society. So we wanted to kind of correct this language issue that exists, and if you can tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. If we rely upon data, women in Italy, women are 51% of the population. In the world, it's like 52. It's slightly more than 50% average in the world. So women are not a minority. Of course. If we talk about data, I think it's about being another important thing about data feminine. It's about displaying asymmetries of power, and that's what to do with what you're asking, in my opinion. It's about breaking the asymmetry of power regarding the power of the white male, heterosexual, cisgender, able, etc., dominating societies in general. Because what we would like to achieve is that, it should, ideally, what I hope is that we don't talk anymore about minorities. That the word minority just disappears. And we talk about, as I said before, the needs of every single person. So we should be, individual approach. Okay, understanding communities, the needs of communities, but looking at singularities, every person is unique. And so the needs, we try to understand better and better communities' issues, people's issues with every person. It's not about minorities, but of course it's an instrument of power. So we need to deconstruct it, be conscious, and try to fight these labels. I make an example. I'm very fond of Middle Eastern politics because I study international relations. And so, how important is language? To be intersectional, also to get outside for a moment our feminist issues. So, for instance, when there was in the Western world, they were labeling what happened in Tahrir Square in Egypt and all other countries as Arab Spring. But it's a Western way to look at it. They were calling themselves, revolutions, revolts. That's completely different than using Caesarean names. So it's about, what I want to get to is fight this labeling. So what I'm saying is, I would propose, let's not use it. Let's fight it by saying, we don't say minorities, we name the communities, we name the needs. Because I give you an example of what we do when we do training for institution or for everyone in general to understand gender approach to policies, to life in general. So we say having a gender approach, it's not about having an approach for women. It's about having an approach for each gender. So we give an example about health. Men are very bad at health prevention. They don't take care of themselves. So they don't do exams in advance, prevention tests. So, for instance, there was a case in Canada where there was a study showing that there were feminist women mayors, for example, that do programs for prevention in health system. And so they reduce the men mortality. So just to give you an example, having a gender approach means to look the needs of every single gender and person, not just women. So that's why I say it helps to look at the person needs, the different gender characteristics, to find a better solution for having better lives for everybody. That's where we want to get to, and that's the priority. So let's try. I propose let's fight it. Just say no, we don't use minority, and let's see how it goes. Let's try to find the language and fight to start the system that it's a system of power, no? Using this to control the narrative. So we should switch the narrative. It's like also when we fight abortion, we fight the block to abortion by, they call them the extremist groups. They're anti-choices, women choices, but they decide to call themselves pro-life to show a narrative that they are pro-life for the kids and not. So what that doesn't mean to control the narrative. So in fighting it, we should not call them pro-life, but call them anti-choice. And that's what we are fighting for. Fighting the language, the storytelling, an oppressive narrative. We should do it for every topic, basically.
Yeah. And I think something you were already mentioning while you were talking is that also it's so important that whoever also looks at the data looks at the data in a certain way, because of course even data needs to be interpreted. I mean, it's not just number, it's number that someone takes and interprets in a way. So even if you unpack them, you should have in some way, you should not be biased. This is also something we are always struggling, because then we can collect all the data we want in the perfect way and the best way we want, but then how do you, I don't know, even train maybe, how do you go and make people understand how they should look and interpret those data? I feel that's also something that is key. I mean, you were saying, I think you do training on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about, thanks God, I mean, we have a genealogy, we have economists, feminists that have been working for years, statisticians. I mean, we're lucky, we have other women that have been fighting this. So there are methods, there are ways of doing it, and it's about questioning everything. It's about what we collect, how we collect it, how we use it, how we analyze it, how we interpret it. It's about all the line of the process. That's interesting. And I want to be clear, I talk about it from a political perspective. I'm not a statistician. I'm not a data analyst. I'm a feminist activist. So to show you that it's something that every one of us can be conscious about. It's a cultural, steps that we have to do about data. That's why it's so important. So I do it myself. It really changed the way I look at things. So I think we should do these cultural steps. So to give you an example of what does it mean, for instance, we have a gender stereotype. So data are not neutral, absolutely. It's not a science. It's a science, a methodology, how you do certain things, but there are political choices at the beginning of the process of what you want to gather, what data you want, what you want to do. It's all a political choice. We should
and also
not
where sometimes is a political
yeah,
choice.
absolutely. So we should not give up these choices. If our politicians give up these choices, they're lying. It's not a technician that can decide. It's a political choice, all of it. And so, for instance, using a gender stereotype for data means the classical example that feminist economists always use. It's about, for instance, you want to measure poverty. If you measure poverty using family as the unit, you're doing a gender stereotype because you're doing an average that assumes to be equal, that every member is equal, because the average makes everyone, the balance disappear in a sense. So you don't get exactly the difference among the members of the family. So that's why we advocate not to look at phenomenons with the unit of family, but the unit of the single person, unless you need an information about families, and then you need it. But phenomena like poverty and specific needs need to be measured at the individual level, not the family. That's the classic stereotypes. And our National Institute of Statistics in Italy still uses family as the unit. It's not that everything is gender disaggregated, for instance. A plus, for example, you don't have any, it's a binary system. It's just men and women. So that's why for instance, a small example that we did in Bologna is that with a survey about quality of life of the metropolitan city of Bologna, in the official survey that the metropolitan city did, they open the gender disaggregated the question, so it was not binary. So for the first time was actually they do the previous year we intervene, they do men, women, other, but it was closed. And we proposed to do women, men, non-binary, other, but open. You can specify what you want to put. And then I prefer not to answer. So in this way, for the first time, what came up is that 1.5% young people between 18 and 34 in Bologna consider themselves as non-binary. So for the first time, an official statistics show this. But at the national level, we don't have it yet. So that's what it means to keep people invisible in the data. So if you don't have it, you don't know what their needs. So you don't see whether a person with a different gender identity experiences differences in quality of life. So these are concrete consequences in people's life, what we're doing.
Absolutely.
It's not just a numbers issue,
And something else we were wondering is how do you go about, because sometimes we feel, because I'm also not an economist or anyone that works with number, but of course, sometimes you need those numbers you were saying to push the agenda or to have, even the why you are doing something instead of, another thing. But how do you get then data to be, to tell stories as well? Because I feel that sometimes numbers are a bit harsh to understand, but then how do you tell also the stories of people that tells those data? Or that you
So
gathered
as I
from?
told you, we usually ask for, we advocate the institution gather data, but sometimes when you don't have the data you need, you collect them yourself. So for instance, what we did, just to keep a connection with the previous answer, there was this official survey on the quality of life of people. And then we used the same questions with some slight differences, but same to compare them among the LGBT community in Bologna, because there is no data about the LGBT community. Data don't exist. So we say, in this way, we can compare the answer and understand the differences with the official statistic group used for the official survey, with the survey with the community. So that's how you also, from grassroots activity, you can gather the data you don't do. And the way you frame the questions and how you do your survey can help you build up the story, as you were asking. So it also depends on what question you're going to ask. And so, because, sometimes you have closed question, can have open question, and the qualitative work can help you out understanding more, let people write and tell you what are issues, how they see certain things. So it's a mix of closed and open questions. So in this way, you can gather more information. It depends on the goal you want to achieve. So in this way, the way you frame the survey, it's very important in the way what information you get, and then how you can also tell more stories. Of course, very in-depth stories are in in-depth individual interviews. So there are different instruments for achieving different goals. But sometimes, for instance, we use the surveys that have both closed questions and open questions to do both of the things. Also to get some qualitative results and telling more about what a closed question can give you. That's very limited in the scope.
Yeah. And can you kind of tell us a little bit about what is the process of gathering data and how that data then goes to advocacy phase and then it becomes policy? Like, what is the process from gathering data to having a policy that actually starts being worked on the ground? And also I wanted to ask you, do you think in an ideal world, I don't know how an ideal world would look like, but do you think in an ideal world, would advocacy be the best way of creating policies, or could we kind of think about a little bit more consultative environments between like individuals and communities and institutions on how policies are made? So if you can tell us what's the process now and what would be the ideal situation?
I mean, basically what we are getting from having direct contacts with policymakers both local but also national level is that they don't use data to program policies. The absurd thing is that they have data, but they don't use it to understand what choices they want to make, overall speaking. They're using for reports, so they have their idea, but it's not what guides them. So what we're trying to do is that to push for using data. That's why you need the gender disaggregated data with an intersectional approach. So how you can frame the most effective policy if you don't use this data? So if you don't have it, it's itself an example, a signal that they are not doing the right programming of policies, because they don't have the data, so they cannot do it. Because you start from the data, you understand the context of a phenomenon, of a topic, and then you understand what you want to do. You have to choose what's the best way to do it according to your objective. There are political choices to make, because it's not a direct consequence. You can have the best data and still do shitty policies, And it's not. I want to make this sure. I mean, it's not. But of course, it's the first step. If you don't have them, for sure, you're not going to have effective policies, or can be a stroke of luck, incredible, a miracle. But usually miracles don't happen too often. So we should have good data, quality data, fair data, and then it's a good stepping stone, a first step to go and having a good policy. So the first thing, I use data for policies. And it's a very hard road to get there, because there are many obstacles, bureaucratic one, investment to do it, interoperability of platforms. So some data institutions don't talk to each other. We even discovered that some public institutions, they need to pay among themselves to get the data, their data set. So it's incredible, the system. We really need to fix this up, because if they don't, with the technology we have, artificial intelligence, whatever, if we don't use properly the data, you're just missing an opportunity. We had a very good example. I can share it because the representative made a very, let's say, the Secretary of Digital Innovation of Bologna, when there was the flood months ago, they used a system of data, and basically they know where they have disabled people, for instance, or older people. They know the buildings exactly. They know if the building doesn't have the elevator or not, and they send people to help them out to evacuate and be safe. So that's an example that if you have data and you use them in a good, properly, you can really do very great things for saving people's lives, for improving their lives. So that's a practical example of really how you can do good things. So we really need to push for asking, trainings, money investments for training, better platform, better way of using it, training the public administration, because most of them, it's an older generation still, they do not use the proper, platform. So there are all these things to, be done. And so in this way, the policy process will be, smoother, but it's the start. Then you need to push for choosing the right indicators. Once you have the data, you need to have the proper instruments. So the right indicators, the indicators for the impact, something that is not present, at least in Italy, it's it's the impact in general things. So to give you an example, poverty, we said, you cannot count how many actions you do for reduce poverty. You need to count how many poor people you reduced in a certain amount of time. So that's the switch, the cultural change they need to do in the way they look at things and the instrument they use for doing policies. That's where we want to get them, and now we can have more effective policies overall. The second question regarding advocacy is that, advocacy, it's a way of, compensating the not participatory approach you have in the beginning of the process. Because ideally, if you involve people, communities in the decisions, maybe you cannot, ideally, you will not need advocacy theoretically. But the problem, but if we want to enlarge the view, is that can you build a process where you get all the communities you should get? Because if you are really intersectional, you really need to be very careful on all the people you need to involve, right? So, or we are very good at doing it, or there is a risk that somebody somehow has been left out. So maybe in the end, you will always need an advocacy check in case something, some communities, some issues are missed and left out. You know what I mean? So, and that's interesting because we are seeing it in what I told you before about artificial intelligence for biases. Can you detect, there is no technology that can detect all the possible biases. What we are finding out is that there is no way of envisioning an algorithm that from the beginning thinks of all the possible biases. So what you need is always a co-designing, an involvement of communities, of people to really always check what has been left out, what is missing, because it's almost impossible to get everything from the beginning. I mean, maybe we will get there, but it's very unlikely, it's very difficult. So while we get there, you always need a community check, advocacy, participatory involvement, because something will be left out, unfortunately. It's very difficult.
And piggyback on this, I feel that sometimes, especially when we talk about digital tools, we feel that someone somewhere will do it for us and we'll just need to use it. While on the other side, machine learning or digital tools are biased because who is doing them is biased himself or herself. So it's this key thing that for some reason in our mind, because it's digital, it's perfect, while it's never like this. As you were saying, algorithms are probably one of the things that we did that are most biased as everything, because who did them was biased. And as you were saying, I think it's really important to get people, communities, advocacy into the process to avoid that this happen. And I don't know how, because we're talking about data more than digital, but how do we get in general the understanding that digital is a tool and you are the mind that does the digital tool. It's not that the digital tool is just, I don't know, given for granted.
It's another powerful narrative. Of course, it's a manipulation. It's a narrative, a storytelling used to put people not to question what's behind the machine. So we need many things because we need action. It's very complicated because we need action at every level. We need storytelling. We need journalists. We need people in the media helping out in deconstructing this false narrative. Then you need trainings to people. Then you need economic opportunities because there are people that cannot afford to buy certain kind of instruments. Or older people that don't know how to use them. So you need a training on the knowledge, the economic opportunity to buy the material. So you need to have an equal field of opportunities because otherwise the community are not empowered. So you need to have empowerment activities so that people are able really to do that kind of work. So it's a complex thing that requires many different kind of action, many different kind of institutions should have economic investments in the buying instruments and promoting free trainings, and then organization of civil society can help doing the trainings, spread knowledge. The media can do other kind of activities and having more accurate and different writings and reportage about it, and not increasing this narrative of the digital that will make fair decisions, because it's not like that we are using the machine that's programmed by human beings. So human beings are biased. So they're just a more powerful tool that enlarge exponentially all the biases that the human being has. That's what we are not, what's really scary that we should really be aware. It's the other level. It's the general artificial intelligence. Which means it's a general intelligence that works on its own. That's a new frontier. That is still not there are not many talks about it, unfortunately, in the mainstream, at least. But that's the new development that we should look very carefully, because, it means that a machine can just it doesn't get your instruction. It thinks on its own about what instruction to follow to do what has to do. So it will be independent from the human being. So, but what's gonna happen? What's gonna do this machine? You know what I mean? It's gonna slip out of our control. So I think it's very dangerous. We should really have a governance of what's happening, because there is no governance of it. We have companies that are just developing things without any control, any boundaries. And that's where it's very scary. We should talk more and more. We are behind. Even the European Artificial Act, AI Act, it still doesn't deal with this, So institutions are really far by political system, very far behind compared to the technological development. So we really need to catch up, especially activists and organizations, to really fight for it, because even to give you an example, even the AI Act, so we have this big topic of general AI nobody's talking about in the mainstream, but we also have the fact that the AI Act, has protection of fundamental rights against risks, but migrants, people outside the EU, does not have this protection. So we are formalizing, citizenship, first-class citizens and second-class, third-class, or whatever. So there are many topics that need to be talked about, and we don't have I think, an effective and really appropriate debate of all the complexities and the things we should look at of what's at stake,
Yeah, I feel in iRobot. Do you remember the book and the movie with Will Smith?
I didn't watch it.
Oh, you did not watch it? Okay. You should.
We shall.
Yeah.
Okay, and there is this question that I've been thinking about. I mean, it might come completely out of my ignorance about how data and the policy world works. But I've been thinking about this process of data and action taking and seeing the social and environmental problems that we see in the world. And I feel a little bit that right now data and like the process of gathering data is a little bit used as a political obstacle towards taking action. And what I mean by that, I mean, especially what I see in the European projects, is that when you see a social or environmental problem, then the European projects start with 3 years of let's say, gathering data about the topic. Then at the end, because the funding is not enough, of course, the data is not inclusive to all the people who are facing that problem. And then at the end of the day, it's also very time sensitive, the data. So at the end, they gather data for 3 years, but they also say that this data cannot be so much, trusted. And then when the funding of the project finish, that social topic, it's like as if it's at rest because you did research about it and it goes away. And I've been thinking about, how can we really address this, in a more practical way and more realistic way? And what has been happening in my brain is that I was thinking that right now, like we need data so much because the way that we think of creating social change or environmental change is only through funding. And for funding, we need to show data. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be, I don't know, more practical that instead of, we live in a world that is, there are a mess of so many problems that exists in it. So wouldn't it be more practical that we like kind of spend our energy on creating communities and give them the necessary, let's say, tools to be able to talk about their own problems and kind of solve their own problems instead of, spending years on gathering data and go try to do advocacy work to just make a policymaker believe that a problem exists at all, and at the end they might say, okay, this still doesn't exist, so never goes to action taking. So I don't know, because I'm always thinking of what is the most practical way to go about this situation of the world that we are facing. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
For instance, data feminism. There are many, approaches, branches, people dealing with it. One of the pillars and the issues. It's also not rely only on data, but it means also relying on experiences with a feminist approach. Like it's not just intellectual one kind, it's also body experience, no? For instance, so the knowledge, it's not only by certain instrument like data. Knowledge, it's about the body, it's about emotion, it's about giving a place and recognition also of this. So just to give you the first part of the answer. So for sure, we should break the monopoly of certain kind of data, as only data and certain kind of data, for sure. But at the same time, there's a cultural switch change. It doesn't happen in a brief period. So we can fight for this because I think it's very important. But at the same time, we can also still using data in a different way. So maybe also, asking for maybe show the data, different kind of data. So maybe pushing and explaining to institutions why maybe we got a certain data and not others that are expecting, or underlying what are the problems and issue with the one they're asking. And so fight both ways in a sense.
Yeah.
So using them, I try to switch, at the same time fighting for other instruments. So kind of saying, okay, I got a certain data that you ask me, but at the same time, I put an activity in the project that helped me to gather qualitative experience, interviews, or other ways. So try, to find a way to fight in the long run for having new instruments, but at the same time, switching and using at our disposal what's officially requested, you know what I mean? And so trying to do a mixed strategy to look at the long run, because what I'm seeing from my experience is that, again, to say using Audre Lorde quote, we institutional saying we wouldn't have one single issue life, so you cannot have, I don't remember quote exactly word by word, but it's the sense is that we are not, one single life people with a single issue, so you cannot have one single answers. So
Yep.
the same, it's like this, we should maybe keep many practices and many ways at the same time. So many
Yep.
levels, many practices, many experiences, not just keep to one. And that's useful in everything. So you do advocacy, then you have the protest, and then you do, and you use the data, you use the interviews, and you talk to the national, you talk to the local. I think we should mix and contaminate and go to every aspect, every level, every instrument we think about and see what's most effective. It's always a mix of things. It's not just one approach or one way. So with the time passing by, the wisdom, there's more wisdom, the step by step. We gather, it point me toward this kind of approach, multi-level, multi-issues, multi-everything, basically. We should try everything and see what does it work, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Try and error. That's the only way.
Yeah, exactly. And try difficult, multiple things. Not just stick to one thing, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess.
Yeah.
What am I guessing?
I
read my mind.
You want to go with the last question?
Yeah, can I?
Of course.
Okay. So actually, you already touched on the last question because we've been stalking you and we were listening to this
in a healthy way.
In a healthy way, of course. Legally on YouTube. So I mean, it should be legal.
I wanted to say
very fair.
No, it's
better
to say. Thank you. And I really love when they ask you to intervene in a conference, and the first thing you say is why a feminist perspective matters also for men. But you already touched on it. But I think I would like also for who is listening, and if they are not women or they are not men, how do we go beyond this binary, and why this your approach matters for all of us? I think it's a nice way to finish in a positive way.
Yeah, we should be positive, otherwise.
Yeah, let's try to.
Otherwise, life is unbearable.
Can I ask also another one?
Oh, sorry, another one. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, on a personal level. And how do you also deal personally with all the challenges that comes with being an activist? Yeah. How?
Oh my God! We should need a
now it's not just a podcast.
Maybe answer me first, and then we close on positive.
Oh my God! But we should need a podcast just on this question. If I can give you an advice. No, I mean, it's very frustrating to be an actor. There are many wonderful things because you meet wonderful people, also not only wonderful, but also wonderful people. It's very stimulating, but it's also frustrating, we need to be honest. But because we're few, again, the more we are, the easier it will be for everybody, you know, because when we can impact change, the more we are, the more we can do, you know, the more effective we are. So let's do it together. I think that's something. And also, you know, mixed environment. We need to, you know, kind of heterogeneity. I think it helps background, genders, age. It's very give different inputs. Would be very healthy way to, you know, and have good support system. I mean, it's important that your family, your friends, you know, understand, share, you know, why it's important and help you out because there are some frustrating moments, as you said, as I was telling you. And so I think it's a very important, you know, support system, support system works. But one positive thing is that in activists, there are communities. That's something good because we are an individual and capitalist society that tend to bring people on an individual level. And activism, the really great things about activism that you build communities, you build alliances and people that you share very important fights that dedicate a lot of hours and part of your life. And that's really, you know, important that you share it. But that's why the more we are, then the better it is. You know, the bigger is the community, the more fun you have in doing things. And when you also to share and getting more, you know, musician, artists, we should really innovate what we do and bring in different words together with the causes because it's more fun. more entertaining.
that is.
Especially in Italy, we really should renew the way we do things because it's very boring. I have to say it, but it's very difficult to bring change about it. So it's an open call. Let's try to innovate and involve and bring more different words to help us out and finding new solutions, new proposals. And so, and then regarding the different genders, really, I think we should find practical issue. It's not about theory, in my opinion. Theory comes next, in a sense. We should really find, I told you, prevention, health system for men was an example. We should really find practical example that really speaks to people, to their everyday life, and then pick the practical example that matters to the different peoples and use it as a leverage for their mobilization. I think that's something can help you. Maybe start small, something, even if it is in your street, something to improve in your streets or in your neighborhood. We should find things close to people that make the switch for them to activate. And then if they see that also, who is an activist has fun, things change. I think it's something that can give an incentive to people. But I think it's also about getting more on the real life. In the real, I mean, not just real, because also digital life can be real in offline life. It's not enough because to stick to the digital. Because sometimes people just write plenty of things, but then they are not in the street. They don't get to each other, especially after the COVID pandemic. So we should really balance the two, use both of them, but really strengthen after COVID pandemic the fact of getting together with your body. Get together, see each other, strengthen the relationship, and because things are more fun and they are more effective.
Love it. I think it's the best way we could close.
Exactly.
Okay.
You did it.
Okay, we did it. Okay, very
cool
good.
name and cool closer.
So just last, but this question, don't worry. So where
don't worry, you can ask me whatever you want.
So where can people find you? And if there's something else maybe you want to promote by yourself or by your organization.
So you find our information at www.thinktankperiod.org. It's very easy saying it in English.
Yes.
And we have, you find on our website, our social media channel, and Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. So we are many platforms. And what do we want to promote? I think this project that we are doing on artificial intelligence called Equitas. So if you digit Equitas project, you find it. It's a very interesting network, university, civil society, enterprises, so technicians, activists. So I think it's a mixed environment that can produce interesting outputs. And we will, keep working and spreading about it. We have public monitoring of public policies, help with this. I mean, there are the things I'm talking about. I think if you follow the channel, we'll keep you updated. Write us if everybody wants to, drop an idea or drop a proposal for work together as an activist, as an organization. We are very willing to enlarge network. Because the more we add, the more we have an impact. So join us if there are statisticians, economists, join us. We really need help because the topics are infinite to work about. And so the more we add, the more we can do. So absolutely call us, write us. We're very happy to have you on board with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Giulia.
You're welcome. Our pleasure. Thank you for having us. Me and period. They're talking about period. Everybody has some multiple personalities, but I think the group experience.
They were here.
They were.
They're with me. They're always with me. We're a group. We're a very united group. So
Thank you very much, and let's meet in the streets then.
Absolutely.
Let us know if you come to Milan, please. Let's get together.
Absolutely.
Or you come to Bologna then.
Okay.
Yes. Let's keep in touch.